So the Bait Finesse reel that I really wanted has finally showed up. And I know a lot of you guys may be thinking, well, you know, the new Conquest BFS has already come out and you've already done a couple of videos on it. But in all actuality, the new Conquest is pretty much exactly what I thought it would be. So it was basically transferring all the new technology from the SHIMANO ALDEBARAN that came out last year over to the new Conquest body. So nothing really new about the Conquest BFS technology wise, but that's not the case with this reel right here. Let's go ahead and open this thing up. Well, damn. I think I have to use the scissors. Of course, I got this from Japan Lure Shop. And let's see what is up. Alright, what is this? Megabass deep diving jerkbait, looks like. X75 plus 2. Pretty decent color. And boom. The new 2023 Daiwa SS Air TW. But of course you already knew that by the title. Alright, so I've been waiting on this reel for months. And let's check out this box. Alright, some of this stuff here. And okay, instead of a clear crinkly plastic, it's like some kind of a cloth sack. Alright, I can feel the glossy coat of the side plates. And let me remove this. There's nothing else in there. Get this out of the way. And boom. 2023 Daiwa SS Air TW. Check that out. There's that spool. There's that new, much bigger brake dial that looks really, really good. Gold T-wing. Feels really, really good. It's got a very smooth shape. Thumb bar, solid. Look at that, there's a hole going right through it. Wonder what that's for. And yeah, this side plate definitely got more holes in it than I thought. Alright, I'm gonna do my customary inspection, take down some notes, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm done with my inspection, and before we begin, I want to show you guys a reel that only the true OG BFS veterans will have, and that is the original SS Air. So, new SS Air, original SS Air. New, original. And I'm gonna let you guys take a good look at this reel, taking all the details while I give you some history on this reel. Now this reel came out in 2013, and I think I got mine in like 2014. And basically what this reel was Daiwa taking the spool and the knobs from the much more expensive T3 Air and putting him into a STEEZ frame. And yeah, even in 2023, this reel is pretty stunning. Look at all the detail that went into this reel. And this was my first ever Daiwa Bait Finesse reel, and it's probably a reel that I probably will never ever give up. Now when you compare the new reel with the old reel, I think it's pretty obvious that Daiwa kind of took a step back as far as details and styling. Now the new reel is also based off of the STEEZ frame, but it's the STEEZ CT, and you can see that they kept the satin black frame with the glossy piano black side plates, red spool of course. But with the new SS Air, they did away with the chrome front piece, which I think looks stunning on the old SS Air and kind of breaks up all the black that's on this reel. And you can see it's just a matte black piece on the new SS Air. And this is plastic right here, and they could have easily chrome plated this just like the original. So that's pretty disappointing. And then look at the thumb bar. Now I know Daiwa is kind of going away from these thumb bars right here, but so the original SS Air's got that nice chrome thumb bar with the little red section, and with the new SS Air, you know, it's just really plain silver, no detailing. Now with this new SS Air, Daiwa of course is implementing their zero adjuster, and this is plastic, just like the lower end BFS reels like the Alpha's Air. But check out the spool tension on the original SS Air. Just look at it. This is machined aluminum with some red anodization. And this is probably the most precise spool tension knob I've ever turned. And even in 2023, it's yet to be matched by any other reel. And I believe Daiwa calls this micro pitch. So there is literally no space or slop in between the clicks on this spool tension. Now I know with the zero adjuster you're not supposed to touch it. It comes preset from the factory, but they could have made it metal and given it some kind of red trim. I mean, just a cheap black plastic zero adjuster is really not acceptable at this price point. Now I do like this new bigger MagForce adjustment dial, but look at the old one, silver with that nice red trim. I mean, they don't make adjustment dials like this anymore over at Daiwa, that's for sure. And of course, Daiwa is no longer using these skeletal Zion knobs, but while they're not very comfortable, they do look very trick. Now obviously styling details are not the most important things about a reel, and the new SS Air definitely is a huge improvement on size and palmability. Just take a look at the massive size difference between these two. Yeah, compared to the new SS Air, this old SS Air is massive, and it was actually massive back in the day when it came out, and it was much bigger and heavier than its competition, which was the 2016 ALDEBARAN BFS and the Abu Garcia REVO LTX BF8. And you can see the new reel is noticeably lower than the old reel. So the new reel is most definitely a huge improvement in palming, comfort, and ergonomics, and hopefully it'll be a huge improvement in casting performance as well. And with that being said, let's compare this new tiny SS Air size wise against some of the current Bait Finesse reels available. Now while I was doing my inspection of this reel, I mounted it on two different rods that had two different reel seats, and this reel is extremely comfortable to palm. It's probably going to be in my top 3, and that's because this is more than likely the smallest reel Daiwa's ever made. And on that note, let's compare the reel size-wise to some other reels, and we're going to start off with the AliExpress Chinese reels. Now the first reel we're going to compare it with is the very popular Dark Wolf Ultra. They're very similar, but their shapes are kind of like the opposite of each other. The SS Air gets wider towards the front, while the Dark Wolf Ultra tapers off at the front and is wide at the back. But it looks like the SS Air is lower. So yeah, the SS Air feels a little bit smaller to palm than the Dark Wolf Ultra. So next up is going to be the top of the line BFS reel from KASTKING, the Kestrel Elite. And the Kestrel definitely looks bigger. Once again, the shapes are different. Kestrel is wide at the back and tapers off at the front, which is the opposite for the SS Air. And wow, it looks like the Kestrel, I don't know, they're pretty even when it comes to height. But it shouldn't be a surprise because both of them have 28mm spools. So the last reel from China we're going to compare to is China's Air reel. That's going to be the Haibo Arise Air. And you can see that the Arise Air is much wider. The Arise Air is actually very similar in size to the original SS Air. And oh, I don't know, I think the Arise Air might be a little bit lower. But this also has a 28mm spool, so it's not that shocking. But Chinese air reel, Japanese air reel. I like the contrast. Blue spool, red spool. So now it's time to compare it to some Japanese competition. And the first reel is going to be Abu Garcia's latest Xenon LTX. And you can definitely see the massive size difference, especially in width. Lengthwise, they're actually pretty similar, it looks like. But yeah, there's no ignoring this huge bulge on the side plate of the Xenon. But whoa, look at that. The Xenon is noticeably lower than the SS Air. Wow. But yeah, the Xenon would be considered direct competition for the new SS Air. So next up is going to be probably the smallest reel from SHIMANO, and that's going to be the CURADO BFS. And yeah, they are very similar. Looks like the CURADO may be a little bit wider, but that just could be a trick of the camera angle. Now I can tell you this, the SS Air feels like it palms a little bit smaller, but when it comes to height, they're very similar. With the CURADO, you can definitely feel most of the reel right about here. And with the SS Air, you can feel most of the sensation of palming coming from this section right here. But yeah, they're very similar. I'm going to give the SS Air the edge when it comes to being smaller though. Alright, so next up is going to be another Daiwa BFS reel. That's going to be the Gekabijin Air. Look at that. You can definitely see the Gekabijin has a much shinier frame. And now we're going to remove the Gekabijin and bring in the Alpha's Air. And I don't know guys, what do you think? They palm pretty much almost identical. That's because they have the same basic shape, but yeah. Alright, so I've saved the best comparison for last, and that of course is the current king of Bait Finesse, the 22 SHIMANO ALDEBARAN BFS. And looks to me like the new SS Air is a little bit smaller. Now that could be just a trick of the fact that the ALDEBARAN frame extends all the way to the front of the reel while the SS Air's does not. But the most important thing is that the SS Air palms smaller, and right now you can see the reason why. That is the huge side plate of the ALDEBARAN. You can definitely feel this side plate taking up more real estate in your palm than the side plate of the SS Air. Now when it comes to height, looks like they're both actually pretty similar, but both of them are very comfortable to palm. But I'm gonna give the nod to the new SS Air as being more comfortable, and that's mainly due to the fact, of course, the much bigger side plate, but then the SS Air doesn't have the ugly protruding brake dial that you can definitely feel on the ALDEBARAN. So yeah, this new 2023 Daiwa SS Air TW definitely is one of the smallest Bait Finesse reels out on the market, if not the smallest. So now that we got the size comparisons out of the way, let's quickly go over the specs and features of the new SS Air. Now since this reel is basically a budget STEEZ Air, just like the original SS Air, it's not going to have nearly as many bearings. So the SS Air has 8+1 bearings versus 12+1 for the STEEZ. So you're looking at a whopping 4 bearings that are missing, and well, I don't know which bearings are missing. I'm willing to bet that they're probably going to be 2 on the worm gear and then maybe 1 bearing missing from each knob. And you can kind of see that these knobs don't spin freely, so there's more than likely 1 bearing and 1 bushing in each knob, but that really doesn't matter because the knob tolerance is perfect on this reel. So in the case of the SS Air, the missing bearings are inconsequential. Now let's talk about hyperdrive. Now currently, just like Shimano with their micro module gears, I count, I guess, 2 levels of Daiwa's, I guess, hyperdrive marketing terms. Now reels that have the lower end hyperdrive will feature, I guess, 3 out of the 4 categories, while reels with the, I guess, upper end hyperdrive are going to feature all 4 of the hyperdrive categories. And the SS Air has the, I guess, higher spec hyperdrive that features all 4 of the categories, and let's go over them real quick. So the first one is going to be the DigiGear main gear. The second one is going to be the Hyper Tough clutch. The third one is going to be the double bearing pinion support, and this is the one hyper feature that's missing out of the lower spec hyperdrive that comes on reels like the TATULA, and that's because those reels have a long spool shaft, so the double bearing pinion support is not necessary. And the last thing is going to be what they call the hyper armed housing. So that means the reel is going to have a metal frame as well as a metal crank side plate, and in the case of the SS Air, the metal is magnesium. Now, I'm pretty sure that the old SS Air had a carbon handle side plate instead of metal, so that's an upgrade for the new reel. Now, just like all the other Daiwa Air BFS reels, the new SS Air has a short 80mm handle, which is more suited for finesse, and luckily for us, Daiwa chose to give the SS Air the really nice looking chrome end caps, which look really good against a mostly black reel. Now the drag star is made of Zion, and you can see it's got the raw marble look, and it's got a satiny finish to it, and of course it clicks. And once again, we have the zero adjuster, and there is just a slight bit of side-to-side play on the spool, so the zero adjuster was set perfectly from the factory. And once again, not surprisingly, we have the gold T-wing, and I think the gold color signifies, I guess, a higher level on, I guess, Daiwa's hierarchy of reels. And just like I mentioned with the Alpha's Air, these T-wings are getting smaller and smaller. Now over on the palm side plate, this is where the SS Air separates itself from the other Daiwa Air reels, as it's got the new huge brake adjustment dial that's been moved to the back. And this side plate's got a lot of cutouts. It's got a nice aggressive cutout that's in line with the big adjustment dial. There's a cutout here, there's a cutout here. So this side plate definitely looks way better than all the palm side plates of all the other Air BFS reels. And I like the fact that they went against the grain and gave us this big adjustment dial. And if you compare it with the adjustment dial of all the other Air BFS reels like the Skekabidjan, it is much larger and a lot better looking, at least in my opinion. Now, despite the fact that the new MagForce dial is bigger and better looking. It's actually, in my opinion, harder to turn. Now if you look from the top, there is a very small cutout that gives you access to the dial, but with my particular reel, it's very hard to just reach over and turn it with my finger. You're gonna have to flip the reel over and use your fingernail to make adjustments. Now remember when I first took the reel out of the box and was closely inspecting it, and I saw the hole right here in the side of the frame, and I thought it might have been potentially a defect, but now I realize what it is. And this is a hole drilled so you can access this little, I guess it's hard to see, but there's a screw there, and if you want to take the reel apart to service it, I guess that hole was drilled there so you can unscrew that little, what looks to be a hex screw. So in recent years, Daiwa has copied Shimano in the fact that they started designing their higher end reels with the screws holding the reels together being hidden and on the, I guess, inner part of the frame. So if you look at the SS Air, you'll see no exposed screws. They're all on the inner portion of the frame. Now with the original SS Air, you can see a screw right there. There's another screw right there. And yeah, there's another screw right there. So not surprisingly, the new SS Air has got, I guess, the new design language of Daiwa's current upper end bait casters. Now let's get to a very important feature that a lot of you guys are going to like, and that's got to do with the drag. Now the SS Air features Daiwa's what they call the ultimate tournament drag, as you can see. And of course, once again, the drag star clicks, but for the new SS Air, Daiwa has wisely implemented a drag clicker. So let me let you guys take a listen. Alright, so I'm gonna stick the reel up to the microphone and let you guys have a better listen. Alright, so what did you think? Now I'm gonna have to say this is one of the better sounding drag clickers I have ever heard on a baitcaster. Now for comparison, here's the drag clicker on the Gekabidgen. And here it is next to the microphone. So by comparison, the SS Air drag clicker sounds a little bit more muted, a little bit more refined, but it still sounds sharp. And it's kind of got a lower pitch, in my opinion, versus the drag clicker of the Gekabidgen. So now that I've went over all the specs and cool features of the new SS Air, it's time to get to the important stuff. Okay, so the scale's out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the weight of the new SS Air versus other reels that I would consider to be potential rivals. So no cheap budget AliExpress reels in this comparison. So let's turn the scale on, make sure it's in ounces, and the first reel we're going to weigh is going to be the Alpha's Air TW. So according to the scale, it's 5.6 ounces. Now the next reel is going to be the Abu Garcia Xenon LTX. Oh wow, it's only 5.3 ounces. I guess I forgot just how light the Xenon was. It's been a while since I've even messed around with the Xenon, but yeah, I'm surprised that it weighs so little. Now next up is going to be the KASTKING Kestrel Elite. Now this is considered a Chinese BFS reel, but it's not cheap. 4.49 ounces. So next up is going to be the Gekabidgen Air. The Gekabidgen is coming in at 5.78, so almost 5.8 ounces. So next up is going to be the old SS Air, and despite the size of this reel, at the time it was actually Daiwa's lightest BFS reel, and I forget how much it weighs. I think it's supposed to be like 5.1 ounces. coming in at 5.22. So a decent weight for a pretty big reel. So next up is going to be the current king of Bait Finesse reels, the mighty Shimano ALDEBARAN BFS 2022 model. And this is probably the reel Daiwa was shooting for with this new SS Air. 4.68 ounces. Okay, so moment of truth, the new SS Air coming in at 5.16 ounces. So it did lose a little bit of weight versus the old reel, but it's still coming in at about half an ounce heavier than the ALDEBARAN. But luckily, it looks to be significantly lighter than the cheaper Daiwa BFS reels like the Alphas and the GACKALL, and it's slightly heavier than the more expensive STEEZ. So Daiwa definitely did not want this new SS Air to weigh less than their top of the line STEEZ Air. So now let's get to that spool and those brakes. Now before I pull out the spool scale, let's go ahead and open up the SS Air for the first time. And the way you do that is flip this latch, and damn, that takes some effort. And I believe, yep, the side plate just comes straight off, and boom, check that out. This is what all the fuss is about with this new SS Air. And what you're looking at is what some would consider an entirely new braking system for Daiwa. So that makes this SS Air what I consider a landmark reel in Daiwa history. So yeah, in 2023, Daiwa came out with two new brake systems. Their first electronic brake system in the IMZ limit breaker, and they give us this new magnetic brake system which they call the SS MagForce. Now SS, in case you didn't know, stands for simple and swift. And what's funny is that, you know, I've had the original SS Air for almost 10 years and I didn't know what SS stood for up until a couple of months ago. So let me let you guys take a quick look at this brake assembly here, and let's pull the spool out. So immediately you're going to notice something off there. That of course is going to be this line that usually goes down the center of the spool on Daiwa Air BFS reels, but now it's off center, and it's that way for a reason. But before I go into an explanation of the new brake system, let's get a weight on this spool. Okay, so the spool scale's out, and this SS Air spool has a, I guess you would call a typical Daiwa spool bearing setup, where there's a smaller bearing inside this aluminum housing. So this housing and this bearing can weigh upwards to 2.5 grams. Now, unfortunately, Daiwa kind of spoiled the surprise for us because they listed the spool weight on their website. But in case you don't know what that weight is, let's go ahead and put the spool on the scale. 7.52 grams. Now, on Daiwa's website, they stated that the spool should weigh 5.8 grams, which is very interesting considering that's the same spool weight of the new 22 ALDEBARAN BFS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to take this bearing and housing off without damaging the spool, and we're going to get a true rotational mass. Okay, so mission accomplished. I was actually able to pull off the bearing without damaging the spool, and moment of truth, let's see how much the new SS Air spool weighs. Whoa, it's actually even lighter than Daiwa claims. Now of course the spool pin is a part of the rotational mass. So if we stick the spool pin on, you're looking at 5.7 grams. So this is the lightest spool in Daiwa history. And just as a comparison, here's the original SS Air spool. I took the bearing off. 6.8 grams, so lost a whopping gram versus the old reel. And here's the spool of the Alphas Air TW. Its bearing is off, and looking at 6.19 grams. So of course add about, I guess, half a gram or so to the weights of the old SS Air as well as Alphas Air TW spool because of the spool pins. But now, how about the SS Air's biggest rival, the spool of the 22 ALDEBARAN BFS, and its bearing is off. 5.75. So with its spool pin, you're looking at 5.85. Now we'll say this, Having bought 3 different 22 ALDEBARAN BFS reels, one of my reels has a spool that's like 1/10 of a gram lighter than the others. So let's compare the new spool with the old spool. You can see that the new spool is much smaller, coming in at, I guess, a standard 28 millimeters for Daiwa BFS reels these days, versus the old standard of 32 millimeters. And here it is against the STEEZ Air spool. And you can really see a huge difference in rotor cups there. But width-wise, they are pretty much identical. Now compared to the ALDEBARAN spool, the ALDEBARAN spool is noticeably bigger and taller, because even though Shimano says this is 29 millimeters, it's actually 29.5. The ALDEBARAN spool is a little bit thinner, but it's amazing that Shimano got this spool this light, even with its long spool shaft and hardly any kind of porting on it. But yeah, these two are running neck and neck as far as spool weight goes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a graphic on the screen for you guys, and it shows that the SS Air spool is definitely neck and neck with the current ALDEBARAN BFS, as well as the CONQUEST BFS as having the lightest stock JDM BFS spools. But you can see that they are trailing far behind the Chinese, with several spools weighing about 5.3 grams. And of course the current line of KASTKING BFS reels have spools that weigh a ridiculous 4.5 grams. And there's even a crazy looking Bait Finesse reel on AliExpress that claims to have a stock spool weight of a whopping 3.4 grams. So when it comes to stock spool weight, the Chinese definitely dominate over the JDM offerings. So now let's get into this new brake system. Now to explain the new brake system, I have to show you how the old brake system works first. Now pretty much every current Daiwa baitcaster reel, if you look inside the palm side plate, you'll always see these 2 rings right here. So you got your smaller ring and then you got your bigger ring. Now housed inside these 2 rings are little circular magnets that are placed like right here, here. I guess they kind of make like a star pattern, but also you can see that there is a channel in between the 2 rings. So on Daiwa spools, they have what they call the rotor inductor cup. Now this little cup fits right into that little channel in between the 2 magnetic rings. Now of course, with Daiwa's MagForce Z as well as their air brake system, this rotor moves during the cast. And then of course you can also control the positioning of the magnets to give more or less braking by turning the external dial that rotates, I think, either one or both of these rings around. But that's how the current iterations of MagForce work. Now with the new system, we're going to start off with the spool. Now here's the SS Air spool and here's the STEEZ Air spool. Now the first thing you should notice is that the SS Air spool is much smaller in diameter, and I believe that is what's giving the majority of the weight loss for the new SS Air spool. And hopefully you guys can see, but they've also flipped the inductor around and turned it upside down. Now this rotor is still a dynamic rotor, it still moves, and hopefully I'm going to be able to show you guys by sticking this pair of tweezers through one of the holes, but you can see it does move, just barely, and the travel of the rotor cup is much less than that of Daiwa's current BFS spools, like this STEEZ Air, which I think has a travel of a little bit over 1 millimeter. So with the new inductor cup, that thing, it moves, but I mean the travel is probably barely, not even 1 millimeter in my estimation. Now on the palm side plate with this new SS MagForce, instead of 2 rings, they're going with 1 singular magnetic ring. That is this, I guess, brushed silver piece here, and it is magnetic all the way around. Now since they've reduced the size of the inductor cup and they pushed it into the spool. That's the reason why this groove in the spool is off center compared to the other Air BFS spools. And this actually allows Daiwa to slim the reel down by 1.4 millimeters versus the current STEEZ Air. Now this brake ring actually fits inside the spool as well, very much like Shimano's FTB Finesse Tune brake. And of course, you can control how far this brake ring extends by using the external dial. So right now it's at 0, and we're going to turn it all the way up. So now it's on 20, and you can see the difference there. Yeah, and you can definitely see that silver ring through the spool portholes now. Now the one advantage I see to this is that with the old system, magnetic force is being applied to both sides of the rotor inductor cup. But with the new system, since they've flipped the rotor cup upside down, magnetic force is only going to be applied to one side. So theoretically that should give us less braking. So when you combine all these factors together, like the much lighter spool, the much smaller inverted inductor cup that has a shorter movement of travel, along with going with only one magnetic ring, Daiwa claims that this is their fastest ever spool, reaching RPMs of over 40,000. Now of course this is compared to their own reels, but I think 40,000 RPM is still pretty impressive, even though the spool is so tiny. So basically what I get from that is that this spool is going to be super fast and free flowing, and hopefully it should cast the upper end Bait Finesse lures farther than the current crop of Daiwa BFS reels, because that is their weak point. Now side effect to all this is that Daiwa claims you should be able to do very low trajectory casts, but they also claim that if you turn the brakes up past a certain point, you can still skip thumb free. So I'm definitely going to be putting those claims to the test. But that's the new SS MagForce in a nutshell. So we're going to wrap up this long video by talking about two things. Now the first thing is going to be a big complaint I have about this reel that I've been silent about so far. And then the second thing is going to be the price of this reel. Now, this reel is made in Japan. So things that are made in Japan generally have I guess a higher expectation of quality. And one big complaint that I haven't brought up yet is that this reel is not that smooth. You can probably even hear some noise while I'm cranking this handle. Now it's definitely not as smooth as the old SS Air. It's not as smooth as the GACKALL. The much cheaper Alpha's Air TW is noticeably smoother than this reel. And this reel is not even approaching the league of the smoothness of the 22 ALDEBARAN BFS and CONQUEST BFS. So that is a big disappointment. I don't know if it's gear mesh, but it's got a little bit of a gritty feel to it. Just a hint of grittiness when turning the handle. So could it be that the gears are dry and need some grease? And maybe this is just an issue with my reel and other SS Air owners don't have the same problem. But considering the price of this reel, that is hugely disappointing. And of course that means we're going to talk about how much this reel costs. So what you see in front of you is the price of the SS Air as well as all the other JDM BFS reels, and these prices are taken from Digitaka. Now keep in mind, different JDM shops will charge different prices for different reels, but Digitaka is one of the biggest sources for JDM tackle. And according to this chart, you can see that the only two reels that cost more than this new SS Air are the STEEZ Air as well as the new CONQUEST BFS. So in this chart you can see that the new SS Air, at least at Digitaka, costs a whopping $63 more than the 22 Shimano ALDEBARAN BFS, and a whopping $86 more than the Alpha's Air TW. Now I know made in Japan does tend to cost more, but this reel better be something special. Now I can overlook the lack of smoothness as well as the big price difference if this reel can outcast the 22 ALDEBARAN BFS. So let's cross our fingers that it can. But other than that, I mean, the reel is supremely comfortable, it's well made, and even though it did lose some styling touches, I definitely do not regret paying that kind of money for this new reel. So of course we're gonna string this reel up, mount it on a rod, cast it around, do some cast comparisons with other reels, and maybe we'll see that we may have a new Bait Finesse king on our hands. Alright guys, thanks a lot.